Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to this remote meeting of the Lewes District Council Planning Applications Committee on 20th of January 2020. I am Sharon Davey, Chair of this committee. This meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the recently published government regulations. For those participating in the meeting or watching on the live stream, please bear with us if we have any technical difficulties. I will now take agenda items 1, 2, and 3 together: introductions, attendance, and substitutes, and declarations of interest. Can I now ask my fellow committee members to introduce themselves to listeners via a roll call? This is to be done in alphabetical order, and I will ask that each confirms their name, if they are acting as a substitute, and whether they wish to make a declaration of interest in any item on the agenda and the nature of that interest. Before I do so, I have no apologies from any councillors. Also, I have no interest on any items on this agenda. The roll call. Councillor Graham Amy, please.
Councillor Graham Amy, I have no personal interest on items on the agenda, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Duhigg.
Come on, Linda.
Councillor Duhigg, can you kindly switch off your mute, please?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Linda Duhigg, I have no declarations of interest on the agenda this afternoon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Jones.
Councillor Tom Jones, no declarations of interest.
Thank you. Councillor Sylvia Lord. Can you unmute, please?
Councillor Sylvia Lord, no interest to declare on this agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Millie Manley, please.
Councillor Millie Manley, I have no declarations of interest on this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Imogen Makepeace, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Imogen Makepeace, and I also have no interest to declare on this agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence O'Connor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lawrence O'Connor, I have no matters of interest to declare in respect of the items on the agenda, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicola Papanikolaou, please.
Good afternoon, Chair. Councillor Nicola Papanikolaou, no items of interest to declare on this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Saunders, please.
Hello, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I have no interest to declare on any of the items on the agenda tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Christoph von Kirche, please.
Councillor Christoph von Kirche, no interest to declare, but I'm not related to the storm.
Thank you. Also joining us are officers Mr. Andrew Hill, Senior Planning Advisor, and Mrs. Joanne Stone, Solicitor, who are in attendance to present reports and respond to any questions from members. Democratic Services Officer Mrs. Jennifer Norman is also in attendance, and other Democratic Services officers are assisting in the background on this meeting. Please, can I ask all participants ensure their microphones have been muted when not speaking. If you have connection issues, you may find it will help if you turn off your camera when not speaking. Agenda item 4, minutes. Councillors, do you wish me to sign the minutes of the last meeting on the 16th of December 2020 as a correct record? I will take it that all are in agreement unless someone speaks now to disagree. Thank you. The minutes have been approved. Agenda item 5, urgent items. There are no items to be considered as a matter of urgency. There is an officer's update, which is a supplementary report, which has been sent out to members on email. Please, can any members indicate now if they have not received it? Thank you. Agenda item 6, there are no petitions. Agenda item 7, written questions. There are no written questions from members pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 12.3. Now, to ensure that all parties are clear as to the Council's constitution, the committee is not in a position to accept any new additional documentation sent to us electronically today, although previously submitted documents will be referred to as part of the officer's presentation where appropriate. We now come to the planning applications. For those unfamiliar with the procedure of planning applications, first there is a presentation by planning officers, then we would normally hear public speakers. However, live public speaking has temporarily been suspended during remote meetings. Instead, public speakers have been invited to send in speeches which will be read out by an officer. Any received will be heard in this order: a representation from town or parish council, maximum of 5 minutes, up to 3 speeches from objectors, a maximum of 3 minutes each, up to 3 speeches from supporters, a maximum of 3 minutes each, a speech from a ward member, a maximum of 5 minutes. Members are then invited to discuss the application and put forward a recommendation. I will ask members to raise their hands electronically if they wish. If members cannot raise an electronic hand, please just show your hand, put it up. Thank you. To vote, I will call the name of each committee member present in alphabetical order. Please clearly state whether you are for, against, or are abstaining from voting, or if you have missed part of the debate and are unable to vote. It is essential that members are present for the entire presentation and discussion of the application to be able to vote on that item. If a member very briefly loses their internet connection, this may not disqualify them from voting on the item, provided they seek clarification as to anything they may have missed as soon as possible after they have reconnected. Can all councillors, officers and participants please clearly state their name each time they speak so that it is clear to members of the public listening who is speaking? Can I please now move to planning applications not within the South Downs National Park? And if I can just turn to Mr. Andrew Hill. Before we continue this evening with the planning applications, Mr. Hill will propose the committee defers agenda item 10 in Kingston. Mr. Hill, if you could just run through that with the committee. I will take it that all are in agreement unless someone speaks now to disagree. Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. Yeah, very briefly, we were a little bit concerned that for agenda item 10, which is in Kingston, that all the consultation letters inviting people to attend the committee and make representations may not have all been received on time. So therefore, we feel that we'd rather err on the side of caution and ask the committee to defer this item, and we will roll it over and present it back to the committee at the next committee meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hill. I don't see any councillors who wish to change that decision, so that will be deferred. Yes, thank you. Thank you. So we now turn to agenda item 8, and that is on page 9. Application number LW/20/0652, location, land adjacent to Co-op, Fort Road, Newhaven. Proposal, erection of 1 2-bedroom dwelling with courtyard and roof terrace. Applicant, Dr. Ansari, AA Homes and Housing Limited, Ward, New Haven South. Recommendation approved subject to conditions. Mr. Hill, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just share the screen. Right, first item on the agenda is land at the Co-op Fort Road. The site plan that you can see now is the plan which is contained within the agenda item. Taking that a little bit further, this is the site located in Fort Road, Gibbon Road to the south. This is the old Co-op building or the Co-op with flats above. It's this piece of land. The land in red is the area of the development proposal. The blue outline just shows the land which is under the ownership of the applicant. The proposal, as set out in the report, is for the construction of 1 2-bed dwelling with a small courtyard, which you can see here, and a roof terrace located to the front of the building. This is just the floor plan. As you can see from the site plan, it's quite tight up within the site boundary itself. The front elevation is set level with the front elevation of the Co-op building, and that enables adequate sight lines for vehicles egressing from the Co-op car park. And it provides a small area of defensible space at the front of the proposed dwelling itself. These are the plans. This is the ground floor with an entrance at the side. All the fenestration is located along here, along the front elevation, and nothing on the southern elevation itself. So it's got a courtyard garden, which is accessed through the building. This is the first floor with the 2 bedrooms. And then this is the roof plan, which shows the roof terrace accessed from the landing on the first floor and via a set of steps up to this roof terrace. The rest of the roof is going to be a brown roof, which will contain PV panels. And again, further looking at what a brown roof is, it's like the green roof, but it doesn't have the planting. It's allowed to seed itself with whatever is wind blown in the area. So it'll become more naturalised than some of the sedum roofs that you see typically on flat roof buildings. Moving on to the elevations, this is the front elevation from Fort Road. As you can see, the side elevation there with most of the fenestration and simple contemporary offset fenestration at the front. A very simple form, flat roofed. This is the Victorian Co-op building to the side, the cottages to the rear, which I can show you on the site plan, and the nearest accommodation to the north. Just to give you an idea of the fenestration that overlooks the adjacent of the front gardens of the adjacent flats, and it gives you a feel for its scale in terms of the Co-op building immediately to the south or the rear. This is the elevation which faces onto the access road which serves the Co-op building. So as I said, it's largely a blank facade. This, just for your information, is the bin store, which is currently located on the Co-op side. And above that, there is obscure glazed panelling to let light in, but to prevent overlooking. I'll move through these. These are just the rear elevation of the building, looking east. Sorry. This is a crucial one, really, in terms of the section through the building. It shows the roof terrace at the front, and in terms of overlooking, it gives you an idea of the building in terms of its relationship to the kitchen, living room, and their habitable rooms on the upper floors of the Co-op building. In terms of the BRE guideline, 25-degree outlook angle, taken 1.7 metres from the centre of the window, and you can see that the building itself is well below that threshold. So in terms of daylighting and natural light, although it's a north-facing window, it shouldn't be discernibly different to the occupants of that property. And in terms of overlooking from the upper floors, if anything, you have the ability probably for more overlooking from the existing flats towards the roof terrace than you would from the roof terrace itself back towards the windows in that elevation. And just to show you a few photographs of the area, again, the co-op building here, which is a nicely decorated front facade with the retail on the ground floor and the flats above. The site itself is just behind here where this van is parked with the flagpole. And the thing to note from this really is there is an issue of parking, and again there's a lack of parking along this part of Fort Road. Gibbon Road, which is to the bottom here and wraps around the site, there is availability of some on-street car parking spaces and further along Fort Road itself. The other thing to note really is the more contemporary style of these recently approved buildings, which are nearing completion now. So whilst the design of the proposal before you today is very contemporary, with its flat roof, asymmetrical glazing, and its finishes, it is very much in keeping with the sort of the 21st century approach to development in the Fort Road area and the more modern and contemporary buildings that are being constructed. This is just going up Fort Road and looking back to the site, and the site itself is this area of green. As you can remember from the site plan, it pretty much covers that area of green, and it wraps around up to the back of the garage here. So that's the extent of the building, and it's slightly set back. The elevation with the door is slightly set back from that curb line, so that you have safe egress from the building. This area here is the highway. You can see the demarcation, and again the building itself will be set back behind that line with some defensible space at the front, with its front elevation in line with the front elevation of the co-op building. And again, just a couple of shots looking back up that access road at the co-op. See the back and the side elevation with the habitable room windows above, which would look onto the application site. And again, just giving you an example of the contemporary buildings which are located directly opposite the development site itself. So this is the site set back slightly from that front and covering up the green area and this area of hard surfacing right back to the garages. That's the application, Chair. Nothing further to add. We are recommending approval as set out in the report. And with regard to the supplemental report, an issue was made in terms of at members' briefing on Monday about plans, and we've provided an updated. We've made sure that all the plans that are being considered tonight were uploaded onto the website. And again, this is the accurate list of plans which we are recommending approval for, as opposed to those that are contained on page 15 of the report itself. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Before we go further, I see a hand up from Councillor Makepeace. No.
Thank you. I generally like to see imaginative infill in urban situations, but I'm
Councillor Makepeace, forgive me. We have to go through other procedures here. There are public speeches.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
Thank you. I will now call upon Mrs. Jennifer Norman to read out the public speeches. Thank you, Mrs. Norman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Jennifer Norman in Democratic Services, and thank you to Mr. Hill for the presentation of the application. We have received one written representation in relation to this application from Mr. Tom Coward and Jay King, the client agent and the project architect. So I will read that statement now. The proposal has been designed as a small and sensitively designed two-bedroom house. The applicant sees a benefit in making innovative use of the area of land on the site of the former Coast Guard offices, avoiding alternative planning release of greenfield sites for future potential residential development. The site is ideal for such infill development in a highly sustainable town center location, not in a conservation area and under no planning designations. To maintain the local heritage interest of the site, the existing public interpretation board will be maintained at a new publicly accessible location on the plot. The accompanying transport statement demonstrates the development would not promote any significant detrimental impacts. The site is located close to the town center and public transport options. It is therefore considered appropriate as car-free, supporting sustainable travel choices as per Core Policy 13, Sustainable Travel. In any case, the transport statement provides appropriate evidence suggesting that there is ample parking in the surrounding area should the occupier own a car. The location has no apparent uniformity in design or urban grain. The form and massing of the proposal is contemporary and has been sensitively designed as subservient to the neighboring 19th century building, currently a co-op supermarket with flats above. Please refer to the provided perspective sketches to see how the building sits comfortably into the highly varied street scene with different scaled buildings stepping in plan and section expressively to manage the topography of Fort Road. Materially, much of the building is to be finished in high quality traditional brickwork, responding to the painted render and brickwork material context. All the above follows the sentiment of Development Management Policy DM25 design. The plan has been designed with privacy and natural light considered, maximizing internal views to the small private south-facing courtyard and windows sparingly positioned towards the public road and to the north. All adjacent windows to habitable rooms have been assessed under the requirements of BRE BR 209 standards. The small roof terrace has been carefully considered in its form and orientation to minimize overlooking to and from neighboring flats above the co-op supermarket, with an increased parapet level to the south to offer privacy and screening. Please refer to site sections supplied to the planning officer to be considered as part of the application. The proposal supports a number of sustainable design policies utilizing an energy efficient envelope and PV green technology in accordance with the objectives of Core Policy 14, renewable and low carbon energy and sustainable use of resources. Further, the development on a brownfield site will constitute towards a long-term sustainability in accordance with national, regional, and local policy requirements by delivering a new dwelling in an appropriate development location. We thank you for your time and consideration. And Chair, that concludes the written representations received in respect of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Norman. We now, councillors, over to you for your comments and question. And Councillor Makepeace, I see your hand up first of all. Councillor Makepeace, then I see Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Saunders. Councillor Makepeace, please.
Thank you. Sorry for butting in where angels fear to tread. I wanted to say that I generally approve of infill creative ideas like this. My one concern at the moment is the actual front door access that opens on and I'd like to ask Mr. Hill what the what you might call the pavement width is as the door opens. What is the depth between the door and the road? Because I'm thinking of occasions when somebody might open the door as a car comes past. This is hopefully going to be a home for a family. There may be at some point enthusiastic children wanting to skip out, and I am concerned that the traffic going up to the garages and people living in the house, it is an incompatibility. And I notice that cycle storage is indicated in the courtyard, which I believe is on the first floor. Is that right?
If I could just answer that, the cycle parking is on the ground floor. You can access the courtyard at the ground floor level. That's where the cycle parking will be. The access strip just outside the front door looking at plans here, is approximately the same width as the door itself. So what's that going to be? 0.7, 0.8 of a metre buffer outside.
Yeah, that's not much, and anybody who's negotiated 1 or 2 children, buggies, small bikes, coming in and out of a house will share my nervousness about access onto the road. Is it at all possible to make a little scoop into the courtyard, which is on the ground floor, so that there is a safer entrance into the property?
Well, as I say, it would be redesigning it. There's, you know, you could put the door at the front of the building, but you are going into architectural realms. All I would say is it's only a 2-bedroom unit, so you're very unlikely to have a lot of children in there. And, you know, in terms of when we've been down there and taken photographs of the garage and its usage, it's certainly not, or doesn't appear when we've been down there and taken photos to be heavily parked or heavily trafficked. And there's good sight lines there. So, you know, I think it's marginal as to whether or not it would justify a refusal on safety grounds alone.
Okay. Does the bicycle have its own door? Does the bicycle storage have its own door, or does the bike come through the house?
There's only one access, and that's through that. It has to come through the house because of, if you remember the plans I showed you, the location of that. I'll just show you the full plan again, if you just bear with me. This is the ground floor plan, and that's the only access from the to the property, and this is the courtyard itself. And then so your cycle parking would be in there, and then you can go up to the next floor up, and again then there's a staircase above which takes you up onto the flat roof. So that is the only means of getting access to that courtyard, is through that door. Yeah,
and that is a difficulty even if you haven't got children, but getting a bicycle in and out of a door like that at a busy time of day when cars are going backwards and forwards on that road. It is something that concerns me, but I appreciate that it may not be feasible to refuse the planning application, and just for that.
Thank you, Councillor Makepeace. Councillor Saunders, and I do see your hand up as well, Councillor O'Connor, after Councillor Saunders. Thank you.
I think Councillor O'Connor was before me, Chair, if you wanted to take him first. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor O'Connor, please.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Saunders, and thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Makepeace. I sort of echo those concerns about the access into, which is it's not a road, but it's the access to the parking and the garages at the back. And I just wonder whether Mr. Hill feels that there's any opportunity here for putting some sort of informative in respect of safety, or lines on the road, or so that it gives additional safety to anybody accessing the new building, or anybody coming out of the new building. I just think there is a safety hazard here, and if there is any chance for mitigation, that would be great. So I'd ask Mr. Hill that question, but I'd also just like to add a couple of thoughts on all of this. I was grateful for the updated details on the website showing the sight lines, for example. That was and Mr. Hill's shown that today, and that is very interesting. The sight lines, so that the residents of the co-op aren't to the south aren't overlooked, and that's reassuring. The other things are, of course, the sustainability of this property. At least there are some measures in place, and it is an infill, which is both an advantage and a disadvantage, because there were reduced sight lines coming out of the co-op, and to some extent coming out of the flats as well, to the north of the property. And it's a use of a brownfield site, which is a good thing. But I think overall it's an interesting development, and we'll see what others have to say of it. I am concerned about the potential loss of parking, and I've just asked this last question of Mr. Hill. When anybody's visited the ground between the existing garages and the green that is where this property is going to be built upon, one assumes that that's currently used for parking, or maybe used for parking for people from the flats. So they'll be on the street in future. So we've not only got potentially the people living in this new property, but also the people who are parking there. But I'm not certain, and I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I wondered whether that had been noted by officers that that had been used for parking in the past. So 2 questions there. Thank you very much, Chair.
Mr. Hill, do you want to answer those 2 now?
Yeah. Yeah, as much as I can. I think in terms of that as a parking area, I haven't been there and seen vehicles there, but I'd be surprised if some vehicles didn't park there. They are the size of or the lengths of vehicles, but all that land is under the ownership of the applicant. So I don't know what right, whether that land's rented out or whether it is his or her land and it's just kept free for their own use. So I couldn't answer that. With regard to adding an informative, yes, I wouldn't be adverse to if the committee felt that would be useful to add an informative in terms of the safety, etc. That would be fine.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Satisfied, content, thank you. So Councillor Saunders, please, and as a local councillor, you might even be able to answer the question as far as the green. Thank you. I can see your hand, Councillor Amy, after Councillor Saunders. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Amy has got possibly even more local information than me, seeing as he lives reasonably close by and drives past it every day, I would have thought. But yes, I have got quite a lot of knowledge about this particular site. I would like, if possible, for Mr. Hill to bring up the slide which had number 10 in the corner. It's the photograph looking back north towards the site with the flagpole in the middle. That's the one. I'm concerned here that we're talking about the overlooking to the co-op building. We're not looking at overlooking and loss of light to the buildings to the north there. And where you can see the flagpole sticking up, that is, I think, actually back from where the proposed front of the new building is going to be. So I think you can see that if you're standing south and looking north here, there's going to be a degree of loss of light towards those properties there, which I don't think has been addressed by the officers in this report. So I'm concerned about a certain amount of loss of light, certainly into the bottom of those first 2 or 3 properties along there with the erection of this new one. I've also, I will mention parking in a moment, but we also need to consider the overlooking from the balcony to those properties as well, which I don't think has been addressed in the report and what Mr. Hill has spoken about so far. There are some comments and conditions regarding the construction of the new building, but I do not see how the construction of a building which is taking over the entire site with little or no garden at all, just a courtyard, how they are going to deliver the construction materials, how the construction plant, the construction parking for this particular development, how they're going to mitigate for that within the conditions which we're asking for the construction programme and phasing to be sent in before any construction is allowed to go ahead. It's been mentioned that this is by the applicant that this is a town centre development. It's actually not, and I've just got a Google map up on my other computer here to show that it's actually half a mile from the town centre. So I don't really consider that constitutes town centre development for this one. And then that would bring us back to the fact that we're the bit of an elephant in the room here with the parking. The parking has been noted by Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Makepeace, I think, and particularly in the last comments made by the loss of what appears to be the visitor parking and the fact that that's going to exacerbate the problems which are evident if anyone goes along there in the evening. The parking is pretty much full all the way along Fort Road because a lot of the houses have already been changed into houses of multiple occupation, with large family homes now being flats, and therefore having a lot of additional cars required along there. And also, Mr. Hill mentions that you can park up around the corner in Gibbon Road, but it's actually double yellow lines quite a way up, and you've got the large marina court at the bottom, which requires quite a lot of parking there. So I am concerned about the amount of parking that's going to, or the exacerbation of the problems with parking on that road. We've already mentioned at Callover that the building opposite, which has been cited as a similar looking development, actually doesn't have a lot of parking. There are only a certain amount of parking allocated on the other side, on the West Quay Road side. So there's not really much parking allowed for there at the moment. And we often see in the evening people parking up on the pavement on that side of the road, on the east side of the road. And the last point I'd like to make is regarding sight lines and the access and egress from the car park for the co-op, and the fact that this building is going to really cause problems with sight lines northwards for cars exiting that road, which is effectively, and as was mentioned again at Callover, it's a single carriageway out of that car park. You can only get one car in or out at one time. It opens up as you go in, but unfortunately when you go in or out, it's only allows for one car. And this is going to reduce the sight lines for vehicles exiting that car park, and also the delivery vehicles that use that as well. So those are all the things that I wanted to raise on this one, Chair, and maybe Mr. Hill could come back with one or two answers on some of those. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to do that. Yeah, very, very briefly, in terms of overlooking, you mentioned, or let's just have a look. I'll just share the plans. I think starting at the end there, in terms of sight lines, this is the access point here, and if it is only used by one vehicle, because the building is going to be set in line with the co-op building, as you can see, you can easily get a vehicle forward of that building line, which would still give you good sight lines up and down Fort Road. So I would dispute that it's inherently unsafe, because the sight lines, as I say, looking up the road, are going to be the same as they are looking down the road. In fact, you've got this build out on the co-op building itself anyway. So by being set back in line with that building, I don't think that's going to impact on safety of vehicles egressing. In terms of overlooking, I think that Councillor Saunders really relates to these flats on this side. Yes, it is close. If it was any closer, if it was hard up here, then yes, it would significantly impact on the front garden areas of those properties in terms of overshadowing. In view of the fact that it's set back, in view of the fact that the sun in the winter rises over here, sets over here, and in the summer it sets up here, rises over here. I think it would be hard to justify that, or to suggest that the building 2 stories height here set against the much larger building to the south, which is the predominant location of the sun, is going to result in significant overshadowing for large parts of the day to the front amenity area. In terms of...
Sorry, Mr. Hill. Sorry, Mr. Hill. Could I interrupt? Did you
yes.
Could you just say where you thought the sun rises and sets on that overview, please?
Well, that's north. Yeah. So in the summer it will rise here.
That's correct. Yeah, yeah.
And in the winter, and in the winter it rises down here.
Yeah.
And in the and again in the winter it sets here. It's usually and again right, and it sets in the summer right up here. So the existing
just to confirm that at its highest point and during the middle of the day, from say 10 o'clock through till possibly as late as 2 o'clock, the southern, where it's at, its southern part of its arc, it's going to be impacting on those Homestrow Villa properties. Then, yes, is that correct?
I think in the summer it wouldn't, because the sun's at its highest. In the winter, there's some potential for it at the middle of the day because it is quite low in the sky. So if you look at December, January time, but it is, again, I would say that it is the front garden and it's only for part of the day. It's not total obscuring that. So I think if you look at the time people enjoy their gardens the most, I think it would be hard to justify overshadowing for that space as a reason for refusal. That's my opinion. In terms of overlooking, yes, I think that's a fair point. That looking at the section, yes, you've got safety here in terms of the overlooking to the properties and the windows here. The parapet wall is lower on that northern side, so an average height human being could stand very close and look down or into windows. The windows themselves are not so much of a problem because it's bedroom to bedroom along this side, but certainly from the roof terrace you could. And if members felt that that was an issue, we could impose a condition requiring an obscure glazed screen, for example, to a height of 1.6 metres, which if you attach it to that parapet wall on the inner face, you would just see probably a 0.2 of a metre upstand of obscure glazed glass there, and that would be sufficient to prevent you being able to stand at that point and look down into those windows.
Councillor Saunders.
Yes, Chair. Sorry, I'm just unmuted. Yes.
Yes, I'm just wondering what your opinion is of that particular condition and whether you would find that agreeable, please.
I would certainly want that condition if we were minded to accept it. That would certainly be a condition that I would want added. I would also like to see some stronger conditions around the construction of this, because I'm really concerned about how on earth they are going to site materials and actually construct this on this postage stamp site. Well, I don't mean to be to say that it is a small site, but what I'm saying is there is no room outside the building to actually site materials, etc. during the construction. That is my big concern here at the moment. And I would like to see some stronger conditions put in. I appreciate that we're being, the officers have asked for a construction plan, a construction management plan before the actual application is approved to go ahead. But I cannot see at this stage how on earth they can do it, because there's nowhere nearby that they can temporarily site construction materials and demolition materials, in other words, excavated materials. So, yeah, that's a concern. Thank you, Chair. I'll let somebody else speak if they need to.
Okay, so I think Mr. Hill's taken that on board. Thank you. It's Councillor Amy, and then after that, Councillor Papanikolaou. Councillor Amy, please.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned parking on the site. The Coast Guard vehicles used to park just on that area of green between the garage site, the area of tarmac just between the garage site and the green itself. I have to say I owe Mr. Hill an apology because I thought the site was a lot smaller in width than it was. So I went down with my tape measure today and I was quite astounded. It's quite a good enough for a property to go on, let's say that. I'm not happy about the fact that if you think about the Sheffield Hotel, that was built many years ago when the road was much smaller, traffic was lighter. And so the newer Coast Guard cottages are set way back. And it seems to me sad in a way that we're going to possibly allow this particular building to come out level with the co-op. I really felt that the building lines should be actually perhaps the garages to be purchase so that the building line matched with the other properties in the area. I have concerns on the parking issues, which unfortunately are probably outside of the remit of this committee, because most of the parking issues in that particular spot are to do with illegal parking. And that's, as I mentioned, a call over why Newhaven Town Council have had to purchase, they're going to purchase bollards to put at the front of the co-op building to stop the illegal parking, which, if you think about that, cars pulling out with illegal parking on that frontage of the co-op, how dangerous it is at the moment. I am concerned where they're going to put the exhibition board, and I would hope that it is important, because Newhaven has got a lot of very ancient history and some very interesting history around the Sheffield Hotel in this area. So I would hope that the exhibition board is not just put anywhere, that it's put perhaps to the north of this area, along Fort Road itself, so that it can be seen by visitors using the marina and the beach. What other things have I written down? I think that's basically it. The only other thing is I'm not brilliant at reading drawings, and it seems to me that the access door, which we've discussed the size of it, goes to nowhere, because it looks as though the building itself goes straight into the wall, the co-op wall along the side. I wonder if Andrew could explain how people access or egress this particular building, because looking at that in my lines, it looks as though there's got to be an entrance along the co-op road. I might be wrong. If Andrew can get the drawing up and explain.
If you flip your head round the other way, the access door is on the side of the green. It faces north, so it's on the other side to the co-op. The plans themselves show.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
That would be an impossibility otherwise.
Explains a lot now. Okay. Thank you for that. I was completely baffled, because I thought they're going to jump over the wall.
Don't worry, we see applications like that sometimes.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's always good to have local knowledge from councillors who actually live in their own towns and villages. Councillor Papanikolaou, I see your hand up, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hi. I've got great knowledge of the building itself, because it used to belong to my family. It was our family's pub, so many years there and know the area very well. And I'm just a bit concerned because the access to the co-op car park is very narrow itself. And I feel for the residents that permanently sort of feel like they're hemmed in. The co-op opens 7 a.m. till 11 p.m. currently, 7 days a week. So I feel that, you know, if it is somebody with a young child, the noise of the traffic going into the car park, people loitering, it's a constant, you know, battle of never having any peace in a property you're going to live in. They might not realise that to begin with. I know it's the resident's choice, but I just feel like it is such a small space to put a home, and it will be a home, that, you know, it's going to feel very hemmed in. If you know the area yourself, you know, there's a little tiny, you know, driveway to the co-op car park, and then the property is going to be to the right of that. And I just feel like the people that are going to live there are never going to get any peace at all. So I think it's something to take into, you know, consideration with this. So, yeah, I mean, you know, and everybody else has raised their concerns that were my concerns as well. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I don't actually see another hand up. Perhaps we could just go back to Mr. Hill, who could round up some of the comments that the committee made. There was the comments of an informative. There was also a comment as far as conditions. And there was also a comment from Councillor Amy as far as where the exhibition board location should be. perhaps Mr. Hill could just run through that. Thank you.
Yeah, there's condition 2 covers the exhibition board. It's safe removal and relocation. And again, I think listening to Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Saunders' comments, I'm happy to put in, we can put an informative on to bring to the attention of any future occupiers the issue of safety and means of pedestrian egress from the property itself. And in terms of the construction that several of the committee members have mentioned, I do agree, it is a very tight site. It's not undevelopable, but I think it's one of those sites that will have to be very carefully managed. Looking at the site plan and the amount of land that is under the blue line, i.e. the ownership of the applicant, there is space that would facilitate storage of materials, etc. But that is going to compromise access probably to some of the garages at the back. So I think that any development here, we can only look at it from the management side in terms of the CEMP to make sure that those things are carried out in a manner that don't prejudice the amenity of other occupiers. It may mean that as a developer, that people who have access rights to the garages, he or she may need to negotiate with them to curtail their rights for a while so that they can store building materials, because as I say, it's pretty much 100% site coverage. So there's going to have to be some peripheral storage of materials. So those are the things that we have no control over, and that is for them to, as a developer, to sort out and to arrange if they need rights over land which they don't own, or which could compromise others' rights who may have a right to access and egress over land which is in their ownership. But all we can do, as I say, through the CEMP really, is to obviously make the developer aware that this is an extremely tight site and that all endeavours should be taken to ensure that the development, if approved and carried out, doesn't compromise the safe access and egress to and from the other garages or any other rights that others may have, pedestrians, etc.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. I can see you'd like to come back, Councillor Saunders. Have you got something new to add to this discussion, please? Thank you.
It's a question of Mr. Hill, if I may, Chair. Thank you for allowing that. It's regarding this construction management plan. Could he just give us some information on the sorts of things that they will be asking for and to be approved? So, for instance, as a builder myself, I know that we have to have some site welfare, an office or some toilets and things. These are other things. And I'm just wondering what would meet the criteria for you to approve a management plan. If you could just give us confidence in that, it may sway my opinion on this particular application. Thank you.
Yeah, it is difficult, and some of the things you mentioned there about site welfare, that's health and safety matters. That's not a planning matter. We can have regard to where they site those facilities. So that's the sort of thing. So where they, and the details set out on page 16 and 17, frequency and type of vehicles they're going to be using, where they're going to park visitors, loading and unloading of plant materials, any waste storage, any security hoarding, precautions put in place to guard against deposit of mud on the road, wheel washing. And again, this is a very tight site, so there's limited capacity, and it will be interesting to see what the developer comes back with. And then that goes on to lighting, control measures of dust, pollution whilst they're actually carrying out works on the site. Safeguarding public rights of way or providing temporary diversions. Those things, they're all set out there. So I think as far as we can go in terms of trying to ensure that, if approved, the construction can take place without detriment to amenity. Other issues, as I say, the rights that they may need under other legislation, health and safety legislation, or rights from other people who have a right to travel over or pass over land which is under the applicant's control, and they may need to extinguish those. That's separate to planning. But what we've tried to do here in the CEMP is to look at those elements where they stand out to us as could cause a nuisance in the vicinity as and when any construction goes ahead. So we want to see those details. So yes, to see a site plan to show how they're going to set that site up will be interesting, but it's not in itself a reason to withhold permission, because there are always ways around it. They could do a deal with the back of the co-op, and the co-op could say, yeah, for 20 grand, we'll let you have part of our car park to store some of your building material. So that's something for the developer to sort out him or herself. We can only control things from the actual building process itself and the immediacy that may impact on them. So the CEMP is worded to that effect.
Okay, I think that's very, very clear, Councillor Saunders, what actually within the planning authority can be put into the conditions. I just might have one thought. Maybe we could ask the planning department just to keep in close contact with Newhaven Town Council. Clearly, there's quite a lot of emphasis down there, especially the bollarding. Thank you. And Councillor Connor, I see you'd like to come back with something new to bring to this table, please.
Was that myself, Chair? Councillor O'Connor here. Yes, it is new, but it leads directly on from what you've just said at page 17. One of the conditions there, or one of the bullet points, says details of public engagement both prior to and during construction works. Seeing as we've expressed quite a lot of concern about this, I'd like a very detailed. I'd like to know a bit more about the details of that, and I hope it will be quite extensive, not just the town council as you have suggested, Chair, but some sort of public consultation with people using the co-op, because it's going to affect them. So I think that needs to be quite detailed in its extent, that public consultation. Could I ask Mr. Hill what that normally is, that consultation? Thank you.
Yeah, I think listening to the committee tonight, I think that if the committee go for an approval, then yes, I think that element I'd want to beef up. So I'm happy to beef it up. Normally, it's about putting signage on the site, having a single point of contact that the public, if they have issues, can phone, can speak to, can get resolution to, can get some answers to. But I think in view of the tightness of the site, then I think we can expand that to include how far that public engagement should to. We specifically listing the co-op flats above and the residential properties immediately to the north of the site, because those are the main properties that are going to be impacted on, and also the any occupants of the new buildings on the opposite the site itself. So I think we can draw a line around that and say public engagement should be with those occupiers in the vicinity within 40, 50 metres of the site who are going to be directly impacted on. And it should take the form of, and we would expect them to come back to us with point of contacts, notices on the site to show phone numbers, how people can get in touch if they've got issues, that they record those issues and they show that they are resolving those issues. And we can inspect that anyway. So that's the sort of thing we would be looking for in the CEMP. And when that document comes to us, it's a fluid document. And if something isn't working, once we approve it, we can always go back to them and say, you need to amend that part of the CEMP because it clearly isn't working and it's not covering what we anticipate. But we won't sign it off until we've read through it and we're satisfied that what they are proposing meets our requirements, and if approved, those of the committee itself.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Chair, I'm satisfied with that, and on that basis, I would be, with those caveats that we've already said, I'd be happy to recommend this, the officer's proposal with the additions as outlined by Mr. Hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connor. But before that, I have seen a councillor who hasn't spoken. Councillor Jones, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've listened very carefully to the points raised by councillors tonight, and in particular from Mr. Hill. I was going to also recommend that we accept this application for approval. I'm happy to second that proposal, which is now made by Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. So we have on the table a proposal from Councillor O'Connor, and that is to go with the officer's recommendation of granting planning permission with the additional informative and condition, and also, in Mr. Hill's words, to beef up the actual construction management plan and to ensure that there will be communication with the affected neighbours and indeed especially with New Haven Town Council. I think that's covered everything that was discussed, committee. So we are now going to go to the vote, but before that I'm going to ask Mrs. Stone to clarify exactly what's being voted on, please. Mrs. Stone.
Thank you, Chair. The officer recommendation has been proposed and seconded. It is to go with the officer recommendation to approve planning permission as set out in the report, subject to the amendment of the condition regarding the construction management plan to include greater provisions for public involvement, to include neighbours and the New Haven Town Council, and with an additional informative regarding safety measures to be considered regarding the opening of the front door onto the roadway. That's the recommendation.
Excuse me, if I just may. I have here in my notes that there was a discussion of obscure windows. Could we possibly just go through that? Because obviously I shall turn to the committee, but I think it's something that the committee might welcome. Could I see any nods if you do, please? Thank you. Mr. Hill, could we just run through that one?
Chair, sorry to interrupt you. It was obscure glazing, I believe, to the balcony. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I had it noted as what we would do is ask them to provide an obscure glaze screen to the north elevation of the roof terrace, so at least 1.6 metres in height.
Yes, thank you. This is what I had too, and all seem content. So thank you, Mrs. Stone. And let's go to the roll call for the vote, please. So all those in favour of granting planning permission, please may I see a show of hands. Councillor Amy, please.
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Duhigg, please.
Councillor Linda Duhigg, for. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, please. Councillor Jones, please.
Sorry, a bit of finger trouble. For.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Lord, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Makepeace, please.
Councillor Makepeace, for.
Thank you. Councillor Manley, please.
Councillor Manley, for.
Thank you. Councillor O'Connor, please.
Councillor O'Connor, for.
Thank you. Councillor Papanikolaou, please.
Against. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Saunders, please.
Councillor Saunders, against, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Von Kirky, please.
Councillor von Kersey, against.
Thank you. I shall now turn to Mrs. Stone to confirm the outcome of the voting, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's been carried.
Thank you. So that is application number LW/20/0652, location, land erection of 1 2-bedroom dwelling with courtyard and roof terrace. Applicant, Dr. Ansari, AA Homes and Housing Limited, Ward, New Haven South, and planning permission has been granted. Thank you. We now turn to agenda item 9, application number LW/20/04 1-3. Location, Brickyard Farm, Little Town, Littleworth Road, Barkham, East Sussex, BN8 4TD. Partial change of use of existing barn, class B1, B8, to a flexible campsite facility building and change of use and replacement of the existing shower block into 2 number class B1 studios and associated parking. Applicant, Mr. T. Bolland, Ward, Chaley, Barkham and Hamsey. Recommendation, approve subject to conditions. Mr. Hill, please.
Thank you, Chair. Brickyard Farm. This is the site located on the eastern side of the town Littleworth Road. Campsite extends to north and south of the site and to the other side of the disused railway line. The application in front of you tonight relates to these 2 buildings, buildings number 1 and buildings number 2. Building number 1, known as the barn, it is proposed that this will, which is currently in commercial use, will be the main focus for the all the facilities for the farm, the reception, shower, toilet, meeting rooms, etc. Some of those facilities are spread over the site at the present time. You have the nest here, which is a B1 building, a building with B1 use. And within that building is also the reception for the campsite. On the other side, you have the building known as Matchbox. That building is also in B1 use, and just to the north of that, you have the washing up facilities for the campsite. So you can see that with the campsite over here and here and here, the facilities are spread down from the main focus of the camping area. Building 2, which is proposed to be demolished and rebuilt and a change of use, is currently used as the main shower and toilet block. Building over here, which is outside the red site area, just to bring to your attention, is an approved workshop building. So 3 things there really is you have 1, 2, 3 workshop buildings on there already, which also add something to the operation of the campsite. And you have this building here, which is totally used for the campsite, and it's proposed to relocate the shower and toilet block within the barn, and this building to be removed and replaced with a building of similar form, rectangular with a monopitch sloping roof, but it will accommodate 2 very small B1 commercial units. That would result in the commercial element remaining down at this end of the site, and all the activity associated with the campsite located up here. Putting a bit more flesh on that, this is an aerial photo. The access to the site is off the town Littleworth Road, and immediately to the south of this property, which is Woodside, which is not in the applicant's control, and just to the north of that, White Lodge, which is private residential and offers B&B. Again, these are the 2 nearest residential properties to the site, the applicant's property down here. And again, it just shows you the relationship of the building. This was taken a while ago, but this area here has been cleared and the new commercial unit has been approved in this location here. The other thing to note is, yes, it's a photo that was taken in the summer, and just the extent of vegetation and tree cover around the periphery of the site as exists at the moment. Going back to the proposed layout plan, and again, that plan, you can see this is the building that has approval. It's not for consideration. It's really just to show you that this is a commercial building which has been approved. This building here, which is the nest, will then revert to totally commercial use, and the reception area removed from here into the main barn. And again, matchbox here, which is already in commercial use. And this is the building down the bottom, bulbs, which will be demolished and replaced with a slightly larger footprint, but again subdivided into 2 commercial units. The barn itself will house I'll show you a floor plan in a minute, will house the toilet, shower room, reception area. It's also going to have a mezzanine within it to provide a meeting area and a camp kitchen at the eastern end. And the building will be upgraded, be reclad PV panels. Car parking provided here with electric vehicle charging points as well. So the main barn, this is the main barn building. You've got some photos of it, but intention is to reclad, put louvers on the windows as well, which will reduce light pollution, photovoltaics on the roof, and green living wall around the edges. So it gives you an indication, but the size and form will stay the same. The only change is that a mezzanine will be inserted to increase the floor space within the building itself. In terms of footprint, this is how it will be divided. This is the ground floor, office, main reception, storage areas, a central large sort of meeting area, communal area, and at the east and then the toilets and shower facilities, which are accessed from the campsite itself at this location. And again, upstairs, access via stairs to provide additional floor space in terms of these 2 small mezzanine areas at each end of the building. This is the barn itself, the larger barn. So this will become the hub, the centre of the camping site, really. The camping site itself, just for your information, was approved in 2012 for, I think it's about 18 pitches. There is a separate application, which isn't in front of you tonight, but which will be coming to committee in due course to increase the number of pitches by 3 and to also add 4 camping pods on the site. But I would just stress that that isn't in front of you tonight. You're only dealing with buildings 1 and 2 that are shown on the plan, and the replacement of one with a slightly larger building for commercial use, and the relocation of all the facilities for the camping in the barn. So this is the barn when viewed from the west, and that would be the main access. And again, this is the view from the barn from the east, standing just over where the disused railway is, and this is the main access into the camping field itself. Moving slightly round to the site, this is looking back towards the main barn and the smaller buildings down here as matchbox and bulbs. This is the nest. So this is a commercial building, but it does house currently the reception. In the foreground here, there will be the new commercial building will be constructed. So the commercial element will stay down at this part of the site. And again, just to point out, you can just make out the roof of White Lodge there, but there's reasonable separation and there's certainly a lot of screening around the site. And a large area here is going to be replanted and the tree and planting will be enhanced further. This is the building known as Bulb. So this is the building that currently houses the shower and wash toilet facilities for the campsite. So this is to be removed and replaced by a slightly larger building. And you can see from the form with the mono-pitched roof, rectangular form, that the new building is very, very similar in terms of that form, albeit slightly larger. Intention to sedum roof, clad it, but down the bottom here, you can just see subdivision into 2 relatively small starter studio B1 workshop units. So that's the proposal. Haven't got a lot to add to that. It's consolidation of the camping facilities, really, in the northwestern part of the site, closest to the main campsite. This field and the field to the north also accommodate camping pitches, and to allow the remainder of the land down here to be consolidated into just commercial use itself. Single point of access from the town Littleworth Road. One issue was raised at members' briefing earlier in the week in terms of drainage. One thing I did forget to say is that on the plan, the sort of washing up area will be located here outside of the barn, but just to the south of that there, it is shown on the plan to be the new sewage treatment area, but there's very little detail of that. And with regards to locating those facilities in this area, we wanted to be satisfied, and I think members do as well, that the site can be adequately drained in terms of both foul and surface water. So we are proposing a condition, as you can see on the supplemental report, requiring details of foul and surface water drainage arrangements to be submitted to and approved by the authority before development commences on the site. So with that, Chairman, we are recommending approval as set out in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. I will now call on Jennifer Norman to read out the public speeches, please.
Yeah, if you're quiet, you can do.
Mrs. Norman.
Thank you, Chair. Jennifer Norman, Democratic Services. We have received 5 written representations in respect of this application, 2 objections and 3 supporters. So I will go ahead and start with the first written representation received, and it is on behalf of Anna and Martin Janes, neighbors, and this is in objection to planning application LW/20/0413. 3 properties border the campsite, predating commercial activities. The site is being overdeveloped from a drip feed of 9 applications over the last 7 years, 3 applications within the last 12 months alone. In 10 years, the site has gone from 10 parking spaces to proposed 40, 2 commercial units to proposed 7. Pitches are capped at 18 to protect the neighbor's amenity and character of the countryside, but further planning is now sought for 21 pitches with 4 new year-round structures. Piecemeal development has ensured the cumulative effort of upscaling camping and commercial activities goes unmonitored. 24 hours of data, Saturday, the 8th of September, 2020, saw 69 car movements on and off the site from 18 pitches. Highways underestimate 2 car movements per day as 7 people camp on the majority of the pitches. Objections to further developments have been made by neighbors and the parish council. The planning system is ignoring the long-term negative impact of additional cars, people, noise, campfire fumes, and light pollution on neighboring properties and the impact on our amenity. 3 years ago, planning approved a new 2-story campsite behind our homes for it now to be repurposed for 6 commercial units. A new flexible camping hub creates a 24-hour building with communal layout for the first time, offering centralized facilities, allowing groups of campers to congregate and socialize, rather than dispersing them across the campsite using separate buildings for showers, toilets, washing up, and socializing on their pitches. This is a considerable difference to a building operated by 1 commercial tenant to the impact of allowing 120 plus campers to congregate in 1 area. We are despondent to see yet again the council support the applicant at the expense of the neighbor's amenity. The scale of these proposals negatively impacts us as our home/bed and breakfast business overlooks and borders the site on 2 sides. If the flexible campsite facility and parking is approved despite objections, we request safeguards are stipulated to mitigate the impact of this development. 1, will this building operate business hours except for toilet showers to limit communal area nuisance, especially in light of the new alcohol license? 2, will it be soundproofed? 3, will events type frequency be limited as per highways report? 4, can windows, doors face into campsite rear of building versus overlooking our bedrooms, bathrooms, roof, terrace, woodland? 5, proposed first floor external patio with roof terrace. Can this be removed or relocated to one of the 2 other sides that do not overlook our property? Can screening be specified to block car headlight glare into our property from 60 new parking spaces? Also, will the wildlife buffer zone stipulated 10 years ago by planning finally be enacted to provide woodland protection from increased commercial activity and to provide additional screening? A new large-scale commercial workshop and storage building was approved in May of 2020, located in the same area, and is subject to restriction of no windows or external lighting facing us to maintain dark skies. Can this principle be applied to this application to reduce the light pollution for us, our bed and breakfast guests, and wildlife? And that concludes the first of 5 representations in respect of the application. I'll now move on to the second, and this is an objection on behalf of Mark Haddock and Ann Guy, neighbors. I wish for my concerns regarding the above planning application to be put forward to the committee. My family and I have lived at the shared entrance of Brickyard Farm for over 11 years, the narrow, previously quiet access road immediately to the front of our property. Currently, our home is on a quiet country lane with dark skies, and we feel this is an overdevelopment and has the potential to change this unacceptably. Change of use for the existing shower and storage sheds into studios, commercializing the existing campsite office building into rentable offices, the recently approved commercial workshop, all with associated parking, will increase the volume of traffic passing directly in front of our property, lowering our amenity. The junction of the shared access with Town Littleworth Road is narrow. Due to this, when the campsite is open, if 2 vehicles meet, one is frequently seen reversing blindly onto the narrow road. With an increase in development, this occurrence will become more frequent and is dangerous. Twice weekly service vehicles, commercial HGVs, 40 cars making at least one, if not more, journeys in and out per day is clearly a loss of our amenity. The wording to convert the existing barn into a flexible campsite facility is at best purposely vague. The combined proposals of this application and application LW/20/0417 increases car parking capacity to 40 car spaces, which is a worrying increase in potential traffic and disturbance. If the proposed flexible space is used for events and presentations as proposed, this traffic will cause a disturbance, particularly after dark. Drawing SCB-LUM010 REV01 states building will be same proportions, footprint, height, roof pitch. If existing and proposed drawings are compared, this is not the case, as the proposed building is 3.6 meters high, the old 2.5 meters high. We raise this as the office building built under application LW/16/0614 was built larger and with additional windows that overlook our property. I would not want further unapproved building to take place that will further impact our home, for which retrospective planning is sought. The proposed studio buildings are overdeveloping the western side of the site. If granted, a light industrial estate is beginning to take shape via the back door. This may not have been the intention of the current applicant, but will be in place for future ownership. A summary of concerns. Increase in volume of traffic on the narrow lane, particularly after dark, close to our home. The loss of amenity caused by noise from workshops and offices close to our home. Overdevelopment of the site. A contradiction on the condition LDC placed upon the original campsite development, stating condition 4 of planning application LW/11/1500 limits the number of pitches to 15 only, for reasons of neighbors' amenity and the character of the countryside. And lastly, lack of clarity as to the intended use of the large communal space within the existing barn and the potential for it to become an event space. Thank you, Mark Haddock and Ann Guy. And that concludes the second representation. We will now move on to the third of 5. And this is on behalf of Nigel Greenwood in support of the application. And Nigel, Mr. Greenwood is a neighbor. Spithurst Hub is a rural co-working space developed by SO Sussex, a Barkham-based business focused on getting more people active outside and having a better understanding of their environment. Opened in 2018, we have been the recipient of the Lewis District Council and Campaign for the Protection of Rural England CPRE Awards. In 2020, we launched the Hubbery Cafe at Spithurst Hub as a positive response to the challenges of COVID. Since opening the Hubbery, we have had a steady procession of visits from campers staying at the campsite. They arrive on foot after a walk through the neighboring woodland for fika, the Swedish name for a break to chat whilst enjoying coffee and pastries. We have worked closely with the Secret Campsite to promote our business as they have ours. Campers often talk about the wildlife they have spotted and the peaceful nature of the campsite. Organizations such as the CPRE and Sussex Wildlife Trust value and appreciate the efforts being made by the campsite to enhance wildlife habitats and put nature first. We wholly support Tim and Lisa's plans, and we wish them well in these extraordinarily challenging times. Mr. Nigel Greenwood. And we will now move on to the fourth of 5. And this is on behalf of Hannah McLaughlin. She's the agent, and this is in support of planning application LW/20/0413. The Secret Campsite is a low-density, wildlife-rich campsite that was set up by the applicant and his family in 2012. Having had great success with the business, he is now looking to improve the legibility and overall appearance of the campsite. The existing facilities are currently clustered together with several small business units on the western side of the site. This arrangement makes it unclear to campers which buildings are available to them. Further to the east, there is a large barn that has no functional association with the campsite, but it is much closer to the pitches. It is therefore proposed to relocate all camping facilities into the barn so that there is a more accessible space for guests to use during their stay. Maintaining the tranquility and richness of the local wildlife is very much at the heart of the business and will continue to influence how the barn is run. It will be a carefully managed, quiet environment to ensure the amenity of neighbors and other campers is not affected. No amplified noise will be permitted under any circumstances, and congregations of people will be discouraged unless they are related to wildlife and sustainability talks arranged by the applicant. These talks will be focused on the Council's climate change and sustainability strategic topics and will take place a maximum of 18 days per year as agreed with the Council via condition. Members of the committee will only be invited during quieter times when the site is under capacity. The application also proposes to replace the existing facilities block with 2 small units for quiet local businesses or artists, keeping all commercial spaces on the western side of the site. The existing campsite office would be leased as a 3rd unit. The net increase of 8 parking spaces will primarily be used by these tenants. However, it is highly unlikely they will be fully occupied, as the use of sustainable transportation is actively encouraged. As an example, one of the existing tenants currently uses 2 cars between 5 people. Overall, the proposal results in several additional planning benefits. The utilitarian appearance of both buildings will be softened by using a natural material palette, including timber wall and roof planting, to blend the buildings into the local landscape. The camping facilities will be moved away from the neighbors, leaving quiet small business uses that are open during office hours only. Ecological and sustainability enhancements are included, such as new soft landscaping, habitats, and renewable energy systems. The proposal aligns with planning policies that encourage a supportive and flexible approach for businesses in the district and supports green tourism. The concerns raised by the 3 objectors are considered to be covered by suitably worded planning conditions. 7 letters of support have been received, including from the local pub and farm shop, demonstrating the contribution of Secret Campsite to the local economy. It is therefore hoped that you can support the application. And I'll now move on to the final representation in respect of this application. And it is a statement on behalf and in support of planning application from Mr. Tim Bolland, the applicant. Lisa and I moved to the old brick house in 2001. Next door at Brickyard Farm was Chubb's Garden Center, numerous buildings, polytunnels, retail space, and parking. In 2005, we bought the site when the owner passed away and plans to re-energize the site as money became available. Sadly, the garden center closed in 2007, a victim of online sales, the economic downturn, and access to money for updating the crumbling infrastructure. Post-closure, we secured planning and renovated buildings. These have been let to local businesses with a connection to wildlife or the outdoors. The site was landscaped for wildlife using old nursery stock and planting 1,000 young trees. In 2012, the secret campsite was born with a mission to connect people with our natural world and the species we share it with. In 2016, we won a BBC Community Hero Award for our work with the wildlife. Our wildlife-friendly approach means we share the site with green-crested newts, adders, nightingales, and dormice. Once here, our campers experience this wildlife, and it is a huge draw, and we work hard to protect it. Campers get to forage a wide range of plants for fruits, salads, and herbal teas. But just come to escape their busy technology-filled lives, see the stars, and relax around a campfire. In 2013, we launched the Secret Wildlife Festival with Sussex Wildlife Trust, and so far we have raised over £18,000 for the Trust's work. Campers can also make donations to the Trust when they book a stay with us online. Campers generate significant income for the local economy, visiting and exploring Lewis, Seaford, New Haven, and the South Downs. They arrive by train, on foot, bike, taxi, and increasingly in electric vehicles and also by car. Many explore the immediate area, walking to local pubs and shops. With over 600 bookings per year and an average of £405 per trip, guests spend a lot in the local economy. The campsite reception sells local produce, firewood, meat boxes, ales, and juices, and we employ local people throughout the season. We keep the site peaceful, no large groups, music, dogs, or cars in the camping areas. We've been featured in many national newspapers and we're one of the Guardian's top 10 UK campsites. This application enables us to streamline the site's layout, relocating showers, toilets, and car parking away from the neighbors and closer to camping areas. It also enables us to provide a year-round facility as per our campsite license. New facilities will be heated and cooled utilizing existing and new solar systems. Sewage is treated on site using solar energy. With the barn upgraded, we can host low-key group sessions reflecting the council's 7-point plan to be carbon neutral by 2030. Sessions will respect the peace and tranquility we have worked so hard to create. Finally, the old shower block will be renovated and let to a local business connected to the natural world. It will have a green roof and an EV charging point. And that concludes the representations, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Norman. So we now go over to the committee for their thoughts on the application. And the first name I see, I believe, is Councillor Manley. Councillor Manley, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check you can hear me with this microphone okay?
Yes, I can hear and see you very clearly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a number of points and questions, so I'll just pop them together. I want to draw your attention to page 26 and 27 of the agenda, and I'm looking at the second bullet point from the top of page 26, which is raised by the Parish Council. And they say that relocation of all pitches to the east of the railway line would be appreciated by neighbours. So my first question is just, has this been considered by the applicants? Secondly, at the bottom of page 26, the third bullet point of neighbour representations is disturbance from additional traffic in close proximity to neighbours. I also just wondered if the applicants had considered limiting check-in and check-out time to keep car use at restricted times of the day. My third point was the 7th bullet point on page 27. Part of the representation says that the light pollution is in an area of dark sky. But if you move to page 32, the final point on that page from the officer, I believe, says that there is no formal dark sky designation which applies to the site. And I'd just like to say that I am very much in support of dark skies, whether this is, you know, in a dark sky designated area or not. But it seems that, later in that point on page 33, it says that the studio would predominantly be used in daylight hours, and the proposal would not result in unacceptable levels of light pollution. And I think the shutters that we've seen on the designs prove that. So I hope that seems to be true and clears that up. My fourth point is that at the bottom of page 27, the final bullet point, it says that the ecology report does not cover light and air pollution. But if you look at page 33, 8.7, it says the application is supported by an ecological assessment, which should cover everything. So that doesn't cause me concern. My final point was just on page 37.9. It says that details of 4 electric car charging points for the development hereby approved shall be submitted. And while, of course, electric cars don't solve all our ecological and climate worries, they are near to silent and do not contribute to air pollution at point of use. So I think that's good planning to enable more sustainable travel in future to this site. So I just wanted to summarise to saying that bearing in mind the predicted increase in staycations for the foreseeable future, that it's this application seems positive for the wider community and logical for a local business to be updating their facilities. And if I were a guest at this site, then I would appreciate the green and well-designed facilities that they are applying for. So therefore, at present, I'm minded to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll come back after we've listened to other colleagues, please. Do I see any other members of the committee who wish to speak on this application, please? If so, could you indicate, please, by putting your electric hand up? And I don't see any hands up at all. So no one on the committee has any comments to make on this application. Okay, so perhaps as I'm the one who lives actually in Chailey and lives quite near, I think there's a number of things to discuss. Certainly many of us support small rural businesses, there's no doubt there. And we certainly support small businesses in the countryside. Equally, we want to protect our countryside. And we all listen today as far as the very positive and also some of the rather worrying comments from the speakers. I'll go back to what one of the speakers said as far as safeguards once I've listened to my colleagues. There is something that it's a strange and unfortunate subject, but I must bring it up because, as I said at call over, unfortunately now I know a little bit about it. And if in the future this application were to be positive, I would be very happy to help. I would assume that the applicant is listening to this. Might I suggest the following is extraordinarily eco-friendly. It's called an aerobic recycling digester. I think it's very important to consider the environment as in polluting any parts of it with any form of human waste. Thereby, I think for me, reading on page 31, colleagues, under 8.35 and the fourth para, attendees would be capped at 30 and non-guest talks could be capped at 18 per annum, no more than 2 a month. So there is a possibility and we're looking at what's in front of us, which is 18 pitches with a possible 7 in each pitch, plus 30 staff are unknown, but I imagine it's negligible. That's around 160 using the facilities. I think that's an important increase and needs to be considered. I think the comments as far as traffic and as far as people walking is taken on board. And I think there should be more clarity as far as the use of the barn. But again, I'm going to go back to that. So those are my points at the moment. My understanding is that there is a black sky policy with the parish council, but I'm going to go back to officers to have confirmation. And I do see your hand, Councillor O'Connor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor O'Connor here. There's quite a lot to take in here, Chair, as we all appreciate, and I was grateful for Councillor Manley going through things in detail. I was also grateful to people who put forward objections and support. I picked up on one particular point. I think it's Mr. and Mrs. Jones wanted better screening. They said that the screening that had been envisaged at the outset of the this creation of this facility some years ago hadn't materialised. But I also noticed the applicant saying that 1,000 trees have been planted. So I'm not sure what's happened, and one would hope that that screening is going to be put in place. My other point would be with regards to the usage of the of this facility. There are various things mentioned in the report, and as you rightly pointed out, Chair, on page 31 about the number of attendees could be capped at 30. Now, I'm not sure if it's appropriate for a condition to cap anything, but I would like that as an informative so that we can refer to it later and say that this is what is intended. We are going to be possibly, we may or may not approve this, and at a later date we sort of have a bit of a creep in the mission, as it were, and therefore I'd like that to be capped and like that to be put as an informative. I don't know if Mr. Hill could advise on that, but that does colour my thinking about this, and I think it is important that we have something to state this. You know, tentatively I'm in favour, but I would like to have these points that are put in the report actually included in the informatives. Thank you, Chair. That's all I have to add at this particular moment, but there is a lot to take in here. But obviously it sounds like a very good facility and it's well recommended and well supported. But I just have concerns about mission creep, basically, over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connors. That's an interesting phrase, mission creep. I remember that. Okay, so is there anyone else who wishes to comment? Councillor Amy, please.
Yes, Chair. It seems to me that it's a question of some form of screening and the access and egress to this site if numbers increase or, you know, on occasions. And I'm wondering if Andrew could advise us, is there any way of making the access egress of this site in some kind of quieter way? Is it possible? Is there enough room to actually put some kind of acoustic screening, if you like, and you know, to have a look in mitigation of some more planting at the rear of these properties? I agree with everything that they're doing, but it does concern me that it's suddenly developing into quite a commercial, you know, business, if you like. So I don't know if Andrew would comment on those, whether they're planning issues or not.
Mr. Hill, please.
Yeah, I'll go through some of the points that have been raised there. Councillor Amy mentioned and Councillor O'Connor mentioned about screening. Well, screening is covered, and yes, they planted a lot of trees on the site already, but condition 5 requires additional details of a landscaping scheme. So that needs to be submitted to us, and that covers all the planting season, British standards, and its maintenance for 5 years. So I think that in itself should suffice, and the indicative plan does show that additional planting is going in, but we want to see the details of that. Councillor O'Connor mentioned about putting it on as informative to cap number of days and number of attendees. Well, we actually think, as you see on page 35, condition 4, we've actually made that a condition and not an informative for the very reasons and some of the concerns that have been raised by the committee. This way, you have something very definitive. It can be monitored, we can look at it, and we can enforce if it's breached. So as opposed to putting an informative, I think a condition in this instance is probably well founded. In terms of the access road, I think there's not a lot we can do with that. I mean, at the end of the day, this is an application to change the use of one building and to replace another building with a slightly larger one, but as a 2 small B1 units. The likelihood of traffic generated associated with these units, yes, it is cumulative, and as Councillor O'Connor said, by the very nature of how things expand and grow, then traffic volumes do increase. But that unit per se, 2 small units and vehicular movements associated with it, is going to be, negligible, and certainly with the hours of use that the building will be put. The access road itself is very narrow. It does pass immediately in front of Woodside. Whether there's anything that can be done, I mean, the whole intention, the whole concept here is to take this thing relatively quickly, back to nature in a way. People that go there want tranquility. They don't want that. So I think it's a bit of a shame that in the presentations there was no real reflection on discussions with the 2 neighbours, and that would, I think, have helped the committee and officers a bit more if there had been some sort of dialogue, or at least that dialogue had been voiced in the representations. But from neither side, supporters or the objectors, was there any inference that any dialogue had taken place, or that actually there was a proactive approach to trying to solve some of the problems. So that's regretted. Councillor Manley mentioned about relocation of pitches. These are all comments on page 26 and 27. They're comments made by neighbours. The relocation of the pitches, it may be a desire, but it's not part of this application. Again, the disturbance from traffic, though, Councillor Manley mentioned, and again, there is only the one single access to the site. So I don't think there's a lot that could be done over and above what the applicant appears to be doing in terms of trying to encourage sustainable transport, people car sharing, lift sharing as well, to reduce that impact, and also to limit to a degree the growth of this site, both the commercial part and the camping side. I mean, there will be a point at which the committee or officers say no more, we can't accept any more. I personally don't think we've reached that point yet, but certainly listening to the points made by the nearest neighbours, I think that this application itself is covered quite extensively by conditions in terms of dark night skies, which I don't think there is a formal designation of a dark night sky here. But again, you're not going to come to a campsite like this and want to be flooded with artificial light the whole time. So I think that with the conditions that we've imposed with regards to lighting, the louvers on the new building, etc., there shouldn't be any increased artificial light across the site. So that designation, or not designation, but the character of that dark night being out in the countryside shouldn't be impacted on. There is an easy solution, as I say, I think, to the access, other than to monitor, to look at the quantum of development that's being allowed on the site. It is a very narrow access, and it's a shared access that Woodside accesses onto as well. White Lodge, which is further to the north, has its own separate access. So it is the single dwelling here that has, or that is impacted on the most by the toings and froings. But I think with the conditions we've imposed, even with barn one, the larger barn, building one, in terms of limiting the numbers of people, it's only 18 days per year. So in addition to the campsite building, the community use, the discussions are limited to a certain number of attendees, only 18 days per annum, and only quite restricted hours as well, between 10 o'clock and 9 o'clock. So I think with those restrictions in place, it allows officers to monitor the comings and goings, and also representations from neighbours. If there is any nuisance caused, then those sort of things can be investigated, and breach of condition notices served, or action taken under the Environmental Protection Act if you've got noise nuisance from the industrial units there. They are only B1, and B1 units, just for your information, and are generally account for activities that can take place in close proximity to residential properties without detriment to amenity. So if they're causing an amenity, I think we'd have to question, are they carrying out a B1 use in there? So I think there's enough safeguards historically on the site, and with the conditions that we've imposed or that we are proposing in front of you tonight. So I hope that answers the questions that are raised. And one final point, just picked up on it, and I did forget this in the supplemental, the late letter supplemental report, is condition 4 on page 35. Councillor O'Connor mentioned that, and there is a part, it was a cut and paste, and unfortunately part of another condition has been latched onto the end of it. So on that last condition 4 on page 35, right down the very bottom of the page, the last two sentences starting after Planning Policy Framework 2019, that last couple of sentences, no development shall take place, that should just be deleted. That's been copied across, unfortunately, from another condition. That aspect is covered in the demolition and site clearance.
Thank you. Just one thing, we have got on our supplementary, of course, Mr. Hill, that officers recommend that the following condition is added to ensure that development can deal with both foul and surface water. That is in the supplementary. But we're going to go over to Councillor Jones, please. Councillor Jones, please.
Yeah, just getting my finger on the right button. With regards to the access to the site, a lot's been talked about how narrow it is. I've not been there myself, unable to, but I might add that I do live on the borders of a not dissimilar campsite. In fact, I walk out of my back door straight into it. And there have been a number of problems with regards to access to that camping site. Now, I know it's a different site, but highways have turned around and said you will provide an alternative access route into the campsite. And only certain vehicles can use the existing campsite. What they've also insisted is that there are pull-ins off of each of those two sites, two tracks into the site. I'm surprised that highways have not made any suggestion about that, or if they have they had any comment as to why it cannot be done. But I do believe that we ought to think about an amendment or an addition to the access route by saying to highways, go back please, have a look. Why can't you say you will put some access, in other words, parking bays along the side of that road? Then that you wouldn't have so much of a problem, especially as it's going out onto a narrow road anyway and onto a main road. It just surprises me that in a way, not a great deal of thought has gone into this particular issue on this particular site. And I think it should be done. And I think we should, as a planning committee, make that view known to Highways. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mr. Hill has noted that. I just think if we should go back to the paper that was given to us by one of the neighbours with Mr. Hill, and I'd just like to make sure that he feels that they're duly covered, and we have this in front of us, of course. And it says, will this building operate business hours except for toilets, showers to limit communal area nuisance, especially in light of the new alcohol licence, is a question. Will it be soundproofed? A question. Will events type frequency be limited as per Highways report? Question. Can windows, doors faced into campsite rear of building versus overlooking our bedrooms, bathrooms, roof terrace, woodland? A question. Proposed first floor external patio with roof terrace. It says, can this be removed? But I don't think that was in the gift of the planning application we have before us, or relocated to one of the other two sides that do not overlook our property. This, I think, going back to what colleagues have discussed as far as the night lights, can screening be specified to block car headlight glare into our property from 16 new parking spaces? I think that the planting of 1,000 trees has been addressed. And it also, lastly, a new large-scale commercial workshop and storage building was approved 2020, located in the same area, subject to restrictions of no windows or external lighting, facing us to maintain dark skies. Can this principle be applied to this application to reduce light pollution? And I just wondered if those points are possibly addressed in the detailed conditions, please. Would you say?
A lot of questions there. It's not soundproofed. The windows on the building have louvers on. There's a restriction on artificial external light. Separation distance from the barn building, if we're talking about the barn building, because that's the one that will be in greater use, has got to be, and I don't have a scale rule to hand, but it's got to be at least 50 metres away from the boundaries with other buildings and landscaping in between. That landscaping will be enhanced by additional tree planting, and as you see, condition 5, we have that. There is no detail on the plan that shows any external roof terrace. As far as I can see, there's only 2 first floor windows which face the residential properties due west, and they just serve the mezzanine floor, which has restricted headroom anyway, and those 2 windows have louvers on, as do all the other windows. So the intention is to limit light pollution. Car headlights, well, hopefully there won't be too many vehicles moving around in the dark, but if they are, then yes, the additional planting that is proposed through the landscaping condition should deal with that. In terms of, it's just come to my mind, the building itself doesn't indicate any soundproofing or anything else that has to be added to it, but it may be that being a campsite, and I've just gone through the conditions myself, and it's something that you may wish to ask me to add in as a condition, is to prevent the playing of musical instruments or amplified music within the building itself, or any amplification of whatever. We have used that condition elsewhere. I don't think it's a problem, but if noise nuisance is, then that is something, if you've got these other groups coming in, that we ensure that it isn't used within that building itself.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. I remember over the years we have often included that particular condition, and whether the committee would feel that that would be helpful, that there would be no amplified music, which is very common at events. So I do see Councillor Von Kerthy, who has not spoken yet, and I see Councillor Manning coming back, Councillor O'Connor coming back. Councillor Von Kerthy, please.
Hello, yeah, Councillor von Kersey here. Can I make a general comment about the campsite? Thank you. Having been a camper for almost, I think, since I can remember, since I was very small, I think it looks like a very lovely campsite. And with the dark sky, etc., I think this campsite will most likely not attract necessarily the rowdy lot. And having camped in Kingston and having camped almost everywhere in England, these kind of campsites are beautiful. In particular, if you want to experience nature. Then there was a point about campfires. I never have had a campfire on a campsite. I had a barbecue, but not a campfire. So an open fire I have hardly seen ever, even on our fairly free campsite. And then I think the light pollution again. I think as a camper, you love the open sky and the darkness to observe, especially in the summer, the sky. So this is my comment as a very passionate and very experienced camper.
Clearly, thank you very much for that. Councillor Manley, you're coming back presumably with something new to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wondered if we were to prohibit the use of amplified music within the building, would that mean that if someone were giving a talk with a presentation that had something like a short video clip with sound on, would they be permitted to do that? Thank you.
My understanding would be, but we must go over to officers. I think we're talking about a band or a group where you want to dance, but it's over to the officers on that very specific question, please. Mr. Hill.
No, absolutely. That's exactly the intention. It's musical instruments, amplification equipment to play music in whatever form, either instruments or recorded music. If you're doing a presentation there, the building is small, and you wouldn't use having a television on, which, because you're showing a video clip or whatever, shouldn't result in noise nuisance at all.
Thank you, Councillor Manley. Are you content with the answer, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. O'Connor, do you have something new to add, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope I have something new to add. It's to back up what Councillor Jones was saying, and to seek guidance from either Mr. Hill or our legal officer, whether it is possible to include a condition or informative about the access into the site. I just think this hasn't been adequately covered, as Councillor Jones has already said, by East Sussex County Council Highways. It's regrettable. I've just checked the actual report and that they submitted that was on the website, and it doesn't say anything about access. It talks about turning points, and those are all included in the conditions. But so I wonder why they didn't include that. My point, I suppose, is as we're talking about, we've got a specific planning application here, whether we're legally allowed to put in some condition about access. I just don't know. So that's why I'd like clarification on that, whether we could put something in. The next point I wanted to make, Chair, was going back to the landscaping point that Mr. Hill referred to earlier. I'm just looking at that condition. It doesn't say anything about screening. So I would like something a bit tighter to say something that screening would be included within that. It talks about all planting shall be carried out in accordance with British standards, etc. But there's not actually something about screening. We have heard that from an objector, and I think that might be useful to have something in there. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, we can amend condition 5 just to change the wording very slightly. It reads, currently a landscaping scheme shall be submitted to. We can say a landscaping scheme which shall include details of additional planting to provide screening to the residential properties at White Lodge and Woodside.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. I must say I agree with that very much so. Councillor O'Connor, are you content? I noticed.
Well, my second point, but not my first point regarding the access. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. So
I think
my
with
understanding
regard,
is we go back to Andrew.
yeah, I think with regard to the access, what do the committee want? I mean, until you tell us what you want, we can't add it. I'm loath to give you wordings for something that I don't know what it is precisely you want from it and whether that can be delivered. You know, so I think that's down to the committee. We have the Highway Authority's comments who said they don't have any issue with regard to intensification of the access. So they're professionals and they will have provided an opinion. If the committee think that there is an issue, then I think the committee need to give me some sort of wording, some direction as to what it is precisely they are seeking to achieve by imposing a condition. Myself and Mrs. Stone can then advise you as to whether that would meet the tests of the conditions set out by the government. So, but I can't just pluck one up. I need to know specifically what it is you want to achieve by that.
Okay, well, Councillor Jones, are you going to be forthcoming in giving some guidance to our officers, please? As you're coming back again, Councillor Jones. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, I can give you some guidance and clear guidance. I've already mentioned the fact that next door to me there is a large campsite which is growing every year and has done for the last 5 years, and to which Lewes District Council, in providing an enforcement officer to take over some of the responsibilities of various issues pertaining to this campsite next door to me, it is quite clear that it can be a condition because it's in the conditions on the planning application for that campsite. You will provide an additional track into the site. You will make sure that there's room for traffic to pass each other on the way in and on the way out. And we have actually had a large say in making sure that's put forward. Secondly, with regards to amplification, music, etc., has there been an application put in for a license from Lewes District Council for the playing of instruments and for the amount of noise which can come from that? Again, I point you back to the campsite over to the north next door to me, where they've had to have a license, which was in fact issued and provided by Lewes District Council. Happy to come back on any of these points, but can I just add that I think they're important points, and I think we should have a deferment on this until we have some clear answers back from Highways and from the licensing committee at Lewes District. Thank you.
Well, with regard to licensing, that's covered by separate legislation. It isn't a planning matter. It's nothing that the committee should be taking on tonight, if it's licensed or not. If the committee decide that they want to put a condition on to restrict amplification music, that may be a factor that any license that they apply for, the licensing committee may take into account. But whether it's got a license or not is neither here nor there in terms of tonight's consideration. With regard to, as I say, the access, yep, I hear what you're saying. Councillor Jones, you're saying that you want them to provide another access, which is fine, but I don't see the data, the impact there to justify that. And as I say, the Highway Authority have considered this and they have said they are satisfied with that. You go back to them, they're going to come back and say the same thing. They know the site, they know the history of it, and that access from their perspective and for the intensification of use generated by this application, they don't consider that there's an issue there. Now, as I say, the committee can take a different view. That is entirely down to the committee, but I don't see anything there that would justify that approach in terms of traffic generation and amenity. I think what the developer is doing, what the owner is doing, is as much as can be done at the present time. There are enough restrictions on there. You almost have a cap at the moment on the development on the site. So, but if the committee want to take a different view, then so be it.
Chair.
Can I just come back on that? Well, having sat with this campsite next door to me for the last 5+ years, I can assure you that it was Lewes District Council Licensing Committee, of which I was not permitted to sit in and listen to. I was asked to leave because I was on the planning committee. And I think that if you want anything done about amplification, you do need the backing of an authoritative group, such as a Lewes District Council Licensing Committee. It might not be part of the planning issue, but it is closely linked in with this application, even though it's not mentioned in it. And there are restrictions such as amplification. They're not allowed to have amplification above a certain noise level. They must not have loud music from bands. I know this because I've experienced it every year, that it's open for camping, which is 28 days at the moment. So I think we need some advice from our officers on exactly what we can put in with regards to amplification. And it can be very loud. And I think this is something where they creep in and suddenly it's there, you've got it and you can't do anything about it. And going back to the access, I'm not saying put in another access. What I am saying, if they own the road, the track leading into that campsite, then they should be asked to provide pull-ins so that traffic can get off. If we don't make that sort of statement, then we are going to have a problem which will occur, definitely will occur later on as more traffic comes in.
I think we better pop over to Mrs. Stone because I think she might be giving us some good advice here. Mrs. Stone, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, we've got to be very careful, councillors, not to stray into the particular circumstances of another site, that we have to consider each site on its individual merits, and the site that's adjacent to Councillor Jones's home may be completely different in relation to the site you have to consider tonight. And so each site has separate circumstances we have to consider. Secondly, in relation to the licensing suggestion, and we have to disregard the licensing position in relation to this application. It is not a material consideration that we should take into account. If the committee are minded to impose a condition that restricts the playing of amplified music, then amplified music is restricted. It doesn't matter what the licensing committee says. It cannot override the planning condition. So you have the gift to restrict amplified music, and if amplified music is played, it will be in breach of the planning condition. So, you know, the licensing regime deals with very different issues to the issues you have to consider tonight, and that relates to the amenity of the immediate neighbours. And you may wish to seek to protect the amenity of the neighbours by imposing that condition, and that is a matter for you. Finally, in relation to the access, it may be considered unreasonable to impose a condition without consideration of the facts whether the lane is wide enough to have an additional lay-by point. It may be you can consider that an informative would be more appropriate for the neighbours, for the applicant to consider a pullover point if there is room to do that. But bearing in mind the highways comments, it may be not considered reasonable to issue a condition that may affect land that's outside the control of the applicant. I hope that explains it, but if there's any further questions, I'll be happy to assist.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. That was very informative. Councillor Amy, I saw your hand up a long time ago.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Councillor O'Connor, because I was going to mention the screening aspect of it, because planting trees might take 10 years before it achieves a screen. My second point, and it's basically addressed to you, one assumes that if the Chubb Garden Centre was here, that there must have been quite substantial traffic using this little lane at some time, but I don't know. I don't know whether it was a commercial venture open to the public or what, but it rather defeated my kind of almost sympathy for the neighbours with the narrow lane and the additional traffic going through, because one assumes that at one time there would have been substantially more traffic. Thank you.
Councillor. Thank you. Just going back to Mrs. Stone and her helpful comments, my understanding from officers is that the access is shared with neighbours, is my understanding. So we are going back to, I see the hands of Councillor Manley and Councillor O'Connor. We've discussed this at length. And first of all, Councillor Manley, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I would like to propose that the committee approve this application as it is.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor O'Connor, yes? Yes? Can I hear you?
Yes, I'm happy to second that, Councillor Manley's proposal. I do have something to add, if I may, Chair, but I'll leave you to decide if I'm allowed to speak again. Thank you.
Well, if it's something that's extremely pertinent, because we've all spoken quite a great deal, I would have thought.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it is pertinent. As I said at call over, I had wanted to go and see this site, but during lockdown I couldn't. And one of my concerns was the access, and I wanted to see it for myself. The reports don't give me sufficient, neither does the County Council's Highways report, to assuage my concerns on this. However, if we had some sort of informative to ask that the applicants look to ensure that there is adequate passing places along the road, along the access road, I will be happy, and I'm not sure whether that's possible, but I'm getting a nod there from Mr. Hill, so I hope it is, and I hope Mrs. Stone is happy with that idea as well. Thank you.
Except there's one tiny point that, and my understanding is that the access off the little lane is shared, but that is not for me to comment at this planning meeting, is it? That is for another day. So there's quite a lot to consider of what was discussed. So I'm going to ask Mr. Hill to run through his notes, and we'll try and ensure that we have the extra conditions, some informatives. So if we could run through that before we go to the vote, I would be very grateful, please. Thank you.
Yes, I noted down amending condition 5, beefing up condition 5 to make it very specific to read a landscaping scheme to include additional planting to screen White Lodge and Woodside. That we add a condition on no amplification music or musical instruments to be played within the barn, and to add an informative on with regard to the possibility.
Could you say no dancing, please? No amplified music, no dancing.
I think dancing would be harder to restrict. I think amplification music, yes, it's very precise, but dancing, hey, I can dance without music. You wouldn't like it, but I could do it. And then an informative with regard to the applicant to investigate the addition of passing places, if possible, along the access road, facilitate safe access and egress from the site. And also amending condition 4 and taking that last part out, as I mentioned.
And I also have here on your supplementary, Mr. Hill,
yeah,
condition, please.
Yeah, the condition on the drainage, yes.
Yes, the drainage and the sewerage. Yes, thank
Yep.
you. So hopefully we're all clear on that. That was very precise. And we now have a proposal from Councillor Manley with the aforementioned conditions and informative to approve this planning application. This was seconded by Councillor O'Connor. And I think that we're going to, Mrs. Stone, are you happy with all of the points that Mr. Hill have raised? Have we covered everything, please?
Yes, you've got everything on my list, Chair. If you want me to reiterate it in order, I'll be happy to do so.
I think actually Mr. Hill gave us the clear direction there. Thank you very much, Mrs. Stone. So I'm going to now go to the vote. All those in favour of granting planning permissions with aforementioned new conditions and informatives. I'm going to now call each councillor in turn in alphabetical order. May I see a show of hands, please? So please say your name and are you for, against, abstain? Councillor Amy.
Councillor Amy, for.
Thank you. Councillor Doohig, are you for, against, abstain?
Councillor Linda Doohig, for. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, are you for, against, abstain? Excuse me, Councillor Jones, are you for, against, or abstain, please?
Councillor Jones, against.
Thank you. Councillor Lord, are you for, against, or abstain, please?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Makepeace, are you for, against, or abstain, please? Councillor Makepeace, are you for, against, or abstain, please? Councillor Makepeace. For the benefit of the listener, I haven't as yet heard from Councillor Makepeace, and I wonder if officers have. But I'm going to continue and I'll go back to Councillor Makepeace. So Councillor Manley, for, against, or abstain.
Councillor Manley, for.
Thank you. Councillor O'Connor, for, against, or abstain.
Councillor Lawrence O'Connor, for.
Thank you. Councillor Papanikolaou, for, against, abstain.
Councillor Papanikolaou, for.
Thank you. Councillor von Kirche, for, against, abstain.
Councillor von Kersey, for.
Thank you. May I just try and go back? Councillor Makepeace. Oh, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Saunders.
I know I haven't spoken for a little while, but...
No, that's why I was somewhat bemused.
Councillor Saunders, for, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go back and try and find Councillor Makepeace, please. And neither myself or the officers have managed to connect. So with advice from Mrs. Stone, I think we might go for the vote, even though we have not gone back to Councillor Makepeace. Is that?
I'm happy with that, Chair. I can see Councillor Makepeace, but we can't hear her. I don't.
So I'm really sorry. I was having some difficulty there, but I hear it. I hear it all now.
May I ask, please, Councillor Makepeace, are you for, against, or abstain for this application to grant permission, please?
I'm for.
Thank you. So I'm going back over to Mrs. Stone for the final result, please. Mrs. Stone.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that that vote was carried.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. So I repeat, with the conditions and with the informatives, planning permission has been granted to application number LW/20/0652. Excuse me, that's not the one I'm talking about. It's actually LW/20/0413, location Brickyard Farm, Town Littleworth Road, Barkham, East Sussex, BN8 4TD, partial change of use of existing barn class B1/B8 to a flexible campsite facility building and change of use and replacement of the existing shower block into 2 number class B1 studios and associated parking. Applicant Mr. T. Bolland. Recommendation approved subject to conditions, and indeed the extra informative. As we know, we have deferred the last item, so it only brings us back to our next meeting.
Chair, can I
Yes.
Sorry, Chair, before you well, I know you're going to come on to it anyway. I just wondered, before you suggest the date of the next meeting, why it's gone, or it appears to have gone to a 4-week cycle rather than the normal 3.
I'm going to hand you straight over to Mr. Hill on that one.
How did I know that was coming my way? I think Jen Norman could probably answer that one. I think it's just the way that they fall. If there's a conflict, because we've also got committees being managed by our DEM services for Eastbourne as well. So sometimes we have these little glitches. But yeah, this one is a 4-week period. So don't worry, we will have a lot of cases for you next time.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point to note is that sometimes this affects the town and parish council meetings, and we often don't therefore get enough time to consult and return our suggestions and feedback to the applications. And it might be worth just checking that any applications you've got coming up, that we've got enough time. I know it should be the opposite here because it's 4 weeks, but it might just be worth noting that to the town and parish councils, Andrew, just to make sure that that's not going to affect any responses that come back from those bodies. Thank you.
If any case comes up that we feel we really need the comments and they haven't been forthcoming, we'll always pick the phone up and contact them and chase them for them. But I'm not envisaging any problem. It actually gives us an extra week anyway. We've already pretty much put the cases together for the next agenda anyway, and they're pretty old cases. So I don't think there's going to be an issue there.
Councillor Saunders, are you
No,
content?
that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I am content. It was just a query. I knew there'd be a reason for it, and I knew Andrew would have an answer. There's always a good reason for it if we change these dates. But thank you for that anyway. And it was just a point about the local authority or the lesser authorities and their feedback. Thank you.
Yes, of course. And whilst we're talking about meetings, you will be happy to see that when your new council meeting timetable came through to all of us, and this is important for the public to hear too, is that we will be going back to our 5 o'clock. And you will have read that on your timetable, which I think is going to help so many of you who have full-time jobs. So it just leaves for me to the next meeting of this committee is scheduled to be held as a remote meeting at 4 o'clock on the 17th of February 2021. The agenda is completed. Thank you for all attending. And I close the meeting at 18:29. Thank you very much. Good night.